The first crack of dawn painted the sky crimson as the auction block was prepared in the dusty main street of Concordia, Kansas. The year was 1878, and like most frontier towns sprouting along the expanding railroads, Concordia had its share of harsh realities beneath its veneer of opportunity. Cole Mackenzie stood at the back of the gathering crowd, his weather-beaten Stetson pulled low over eyes that had seen too much for a man of 32 years. Selling today, a woman contract, 5 years of service to the highest bidder. The auctioneer's voice cut through the morning air, causing a ripple of interest among the assembled men. Cole hadn't come to town for this. He'd intended to stock up on supplies before heading back to his struggling ranch, 10 miles outside of town. But something kept his boots planted firmly in the dirt as the woman was led onto the platform. She wasn't what anyone would call a beauty by conventional standards. Her auburn hair was pulled back severely, her face marked with what looked like a burn scar running from her left temple down to her jaw. She kept her eyes downcast, but there was something in the set of her shoulders that spoke of dignity despite her circumstances. This here is Lillian Abbott. Age 26. Can cook, clean, and came west on a bride ship, but ain't found no takers. The auctioneer's callous description drew snickers from the crowd. Comes with her indenture papers, all legal and proper. Starting bid is $20 for 5 years of service. The crowd remained mostly silent. In these parts, $20 was steep for damaged goods, and a scarred woman was considered just that. $15. The auctioneer tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. Folks, she's got 2 good hands and can work. $10. Cole found his voice before he'd fully formed the thought. $20, he called out, surprising himself as much as anyone. The auctioneer's eyes widened, scanning the crowd until he spotted Cole. $20 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 25? Silence hung heavy in the air. A few men turned to look at Cole with expressions ranging from confusion to mockery. Going once, going twice. Sold to Mr. Mackenzie for $20. Cole made his way forward, ignoring the whispers and stares. He paid the auctioneer, received the indenture papers, and finally stood face to face with Lillian Abbott. Up close, he could see her eyes were a striking shade of green, made all the more vibrant against her pale skin and the angry red scar. "Miss Abbott," he said with a slight tip of his hat. "I'm Cole Mackenzie. I've got a ranch outside of town." She finally met his gaze, and what he saw there wasn't gratitude but wariness tinged with defiance. "Mr. Mackenzie," she acknowledged, her voice surprisingly melodious and carrying a hint of an Eastern accent. "I suppose I should thank you for the purchase." "No need for thanks. I need help around the place, that's all," he replied gruffly, uncomfortable with the entire situation now that it was done. "I understand the terms of my contract, sir," she said stiffly. "I'll work to earn my keep." Cole nodded, suddenly at a loss for words. "Got my wagon over yonder. We'll head out after I finish my business in town." As they walked side by side down the main street, Cole felt the stares of townspeople burning into his back. He heard a woman whisper too loudly, "Poor fool, buying that scarred spinster when there's prettier girls to be had." Beside him, Lillian's spine straightened even more if that were possible, but she said nothing. Her silence spoke volumes about the kind of treatment she must have endured since arriving out west. Cole Mackenzie had never intended to buy a woman's contract. He'd never even considered such a thing before this morning. But something about the quiet dignity in Lillian Abbott's bearing, the way everyone dismissed her without a second thought, had stirred something deep within him perhaps, because he knew what it was like to be judged and found wanting based on appearances alone. Little did he know that this impulsive decision would change both their lives forever. setting in motion a journey that would reveal how love often blooms in the most unexpected places, with the most unexpected people. The wagon creaked and groaned as they made their way out of Concordia, the town gradually receding behind them. Cole sat rigidly, hands gripping the reins, acutely aware of the woman beside him. Lillian Abbott maintained her silence, her gaze fixed forward, her posture unyielding. "It's about 10 miles to my place," Cole finally said, feeling compelled to break the oppressive quiet. "Not much to look at, but it's got potential." "I'm sure it's adequate, Mr. Mackenzie," she replied formally. Cole cleared his throat. "You can call me Cole." She glanced at him briefly, then returned her attention to the road ahead. "As you wish." "Where are you from originally, Miss Abbott?" he asked, attempting conversation. "Boston," she answered after a moment. "And it's just Lillian if we're to dispense with formalities." Cole nodded, guiding the horses around a rut in the road. "What brought you all the way out here from Boston?" A bitter smile tugged at her lips. "The same thing that brings most women to these parts. Dreams of a better life, promises of marriage and opportunity." She paused. "The fire that did this," she gestured vaguely to her scarred face, "took my parents and our home. I had nowhere else to go, no prospects in Boston. A bride's ship seemed logical." Cole absorbed this information silently. "I'm sorry about your family." "It was 3 years ago," she said, as if the passage of time somehow diminished the tragedy. "And yours? I assume your parents are no longer living, or you wouldn't be alone on your ranch. Pa died 6 years back. Ma followed a year later. The ranch was all they left me, and I've been trying to make a go of it since." "Successfully?" she inquired. Cole's laugh was short and without humor. "Depends on how you measure success. I'm still here, still fighting. Got about 60 head of cattle, a few horses, some chickens. Could be worse." "Could be better," she observed. "Always could," he agreed, surprised by her frankness. As they traveled, the Kansas landscape unfurled around them, rolling plains stretching toward the horizon, tall grasses swaying in the gentle breeze. The late May sun beat down, warm but not yet scorching as it would be in the height of summer. "I should tell you what I expect," Cole said after they'd traveled a few more miles in silence. Lillian's shoulders tensed slightly. "I understand my obligations, Mr. Mackenzie." "Cole," he corrected automatically. "And I don't think you do. I need help with cooking, cleaning, tending the garden and such. That's all. Your own room, your privacy, I won't." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "This isn't that kind of arrangement." She turned to look at him fully then, studying his face as if searching for deception. "Most men who purchase indenture contracts have certain expectations." "I'm not most men," Cole replied simply. "And I didn't set out to buy anyone's contract today. It just happened." "Things rarely just happen, Mr. Cole," she said skeptically. He shrugged, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. "Sometimes they do." The remainder of the journey passed with sporadic conversation, mainly about practical matters, the kinds of crops he grew, the daily routine of the ranch, the nearest neighbors, the Hendersons, about 3 miles east. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun had climbed high in the sky. Cole's property was modest but well maintained. The main house was a simple 2-story structure built of sturdy logs, with a covered porch running its length. A barn stood nearby, along with a chicken coop and a corral where several horses grazed. Fields of wheat stretched to the east, while cattle dotted the pasture to the north. "Home sweet home," Cole announced as he brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Lillian took in her surroundings with an appraising eye. "You've done well for yourself," she said, and Cole detected genuine appreciation in her tone. "Many men would have let such a place fall to ruin without a woman's touch." "Had to learn to fend for myself," he replied, jumping down from the wagon and coming around to offer her assistance. "Though I won't deny it could use some improvements." Lillian hesitated only briefly before accepting his outstretched hand, her touch light as she descended from the wagon. The moment her feet touched the ground, she withdrew her hand from his, smoothing her simple dress with a nervous gesture. "I'll show you around," Cole said, pretending not to notice her discomfort. The tour was brief but thorough. The house consisted of a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, with Cole's bedroom on the first floor and a second bedroom upstairs. There was a root cellar for food storage, and out back, a vegetable garden that had seen better days. "This will be your room," Cole said, showing her the upstairs space. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that overlooked the prairie. "I haven't had much cause to use it, but the mattress is stuffed with fresh straw and the linens are clean." Lillian nodded, taking in the space that would be her home for the next 5 years. "It's more than adequate, thank you." "There's a washroom off the kitchen," Cole continued. "I haul water from the well for the tub. You'll have privacy when you need it. You're being very considerate," Lillian observed, a question implicit in her statement. Cole shifted uncomfortably. "Like I said, I'm not expecting anything beyond help with the running of this place." "Your contract says 5 years of service, and that's what I paid for, nothing more." Lillian studied him, her green eyes searching. "Most would consider you a fool." "Wouldn't be the first time," he replied with a wry smile. "Rest up if you need to. I'll be out tending to the livestock." Supper's usually around sundown. As Cole headed back downstairs, he questioned his own sanity. What had possessed him to buy this woman's contract? He had managed on his own for years, and while help would be welcome, he could have hired day labor from town when needed. And yet, something about Lillian Abbott had called to him, perhaps the flicker of fire he'd seen beneath her carefully controlled exterior, or the way she held herself with dignity, despite being treated like chattel. Whatever it was, Cole Mackenzie had just upended his solitary existence, and there was no going back now. Lillian stood in the small bedroom, listening to Cole's footsteps recede and the front door close behind him. Only then did she allow her rigid posture to relax slightly. She moved to the window, watching as her new employer crossed the yard to the barn, his gait steady and purposeful. Cole Mackenzie was not what she had expected. When the auctioneer had announced her sale, she had braced herself for the worst: a crude farmer looking for a combination of servant and unwilling bedmate, or perhaps a widower with a house full of children needing a mother. But Cole seemed different. There was a gentleness behind his rugged exterior that belied his frontier toughness. Still, experience had taught Lillian to be wary. Men's true natures often revealed themselves over time, and 5 years was a very long commitment. She had no illusions about her position. She was legally bound to this man, with few rights of her own. With a small sigh, Lillian unpacked her meager belongings: 2 dresses besides the one she wore, undergarments, a hairbrush, a small sewing kit, and a tattered copy of Pride and Prejudice that had somehow survived the fire. She arranged these carefully in the chest of drawers, then sat on the edge of the bed, testing its comfort. It would do. It would all have to do. Rising with renewed determination, Lillian decided to make herself useful immediately. If this was to be her home for the next 5 years, she might as well begin as she meant to go on. She would prove her worth through hard work and competence, starting with the kitchen. By the time Cole returned to the house hours later, the transformation was noticeable. The kitchen had been thoroughly cleaned, with pots and pans that hadn't shone in years now gleaming on their hooks. The wood stove had been blackened and polished, the floor swept and scrubbed, and the rough-hewn table set with the mismatched dishes Cole owned, now arranged with surprising elegance. Most surprising of all was the aroma that filled the house, a rich, savory smell that made Cole's stomach rumble in anticipation. Lillian stood at the stove, stirring something in his largest pot. She had changed into one of her other dresses, a simple blue calico that had seen better days but was clean and neat. Her hair remained severely pulled back, emphasizing rather than hiding her scar. "Something smells good," Cole said by way of greeting, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. Lillian turned, a flash of surprise crossing her features before her expression settled back into its usual reserve. "I hope you don't mind. I took inventory of your provisions and prepared a stew. Your vegetable garden is in desperate need of attention, but I managed to salvage some carrots and potatoes. Mind, I can't remember the last time I had a meal I didn't cook myself, and I'm no great shakes in the kitchen," Cole admitted, moving to the washbasin to clean up. "I noticed," Lillian replied, and Cole thought he detected the faintest hint of amusement in her voice. "Your larder is woefully understocked, and what you do have is poorly organized." "Never claimed to be tidy," Cole said, drying his hands on a towel. "Clearly." Lillian turned back to the stove. "Supper will be ready in a few minutes. I also found some cornmeal and made bread." Cole's eyebrows rose in appreciation. "You've been busy." "I believe in earning my keep," she said simply. They ate in relative silence, Cole savoring every bite of the best meal he'd had in years. The stew was rich and flavorful despite the limited ingredients, and the cornbread was light and perfectly baked. "This is mighty fine cooking, Lillian," Cole said sincerely, helping himself to a second serving. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" A shadow passed over Lillian's face. "My mother taught me. Before the fire, we ran a boarding house in Boston. I helped with the cooking and cleaning from a young age." "Well, she taught you well," Cole said, sensing he'd touched a painful subject. "Your skills will be a godsend around here." Lillian acknowledged the compliment with a slight nod. "I'll need to visit the general store soon to properly stock the kitchen. Your supplies are inadequate." "We can go to town at the end of the week," Cole agreed. "Make a list of what you need." After supper, Lillian rose to clear the dishes, but Cole stopped her. "You've done enough for your first day. I'll wash up." She looked ready to protest, then seemed to think better of it. "Very well. I'll plan tomorrow's meals and make that list." Later, as Cole lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, he listened to the faint sounds of movement from the room above. It had been so long since he'd shared his space with another person that even these small reminders of Lillian's presence felt intrusive yet oddly comforting. He wondered what she was thinking, this mysterious woman from Boston with her proper speech and guarded expressions. Did she regret the circumstances that had brought her here? Was she afraid of what the future held? Cole found himself curious about the person behind the careful facade, wondering what Lillian Abbott had been like before tragedy marked both her face and her life. With these thoughts circling in his mind, Cole drifted into sleep, unaware that upstairs, Lillian too lay awake, pondering the strange turn her life had taken, and the equally strange man who had purchased her contract but asked for nothing beyond her labor. Both harbored questions about the other, neither yet ready to seek the answers, unaware that time would gradually reveal what words could not. The first week of their arrangement settled into an uneasy routine. Each morning, Cole rose at dawn, built up the fire in the wood stove, and headed out to tend to the livestock while Lillian prepared breakfast. They would eat together in relative silence before parting ways to attend to their respective tasks, Cole to the never-ending work of the ranch, Lillian to the equally demanding domestic chores. By the fifth day, The interior of the house had undergone a remarkable transformation. Years of bachelor living had left their mark in the form of neglected corners and haphazard organization, but Lillian attacked these problems with methodical efficiency. Windows that hadn't been properly cleaned in years now sparkled in the sunlight. Floors had been scrubbed until the wood grain showed clearly. Even Cole's bedroom, which she had approached with appropriate hesitation, had been tidied with his gruff permission. It was on this day that Cole returned from repairing a section of fence to find Lillian on her hands and knees in the vegetable garden, her face flushed with exertion, a determined set to her jaw as she pulled weeds and turned soil. "You don't have to tackle everything at once," he said, approaching her with a canteen of water. "That garden's been neglected for 2 seasons. It can wait another day or two." Lillian looked up, shielding her eyes against the sun. Wisps of auburn hair had escaped her tight bun, framing her face and softening her usually severe appearance. For a moment, Cole caught a glimpse of the woman she might have been before life had hardened her. "I prefer to be busy," she replied, accepting the water gratefully. "And we need fresh vegetables. Your diet has been abysmal from what I can tell," Cole chuckled. "Can't argue with that, but you're working yourself to exhaustion." "I'm fine," she insisted, but the slight tremor in her hand as she returned the canteen betrayed her fatigue. "We're going to town tomorrow," Cole decided. "You need proper supplies, and we both could use a break from this place." Lillian seemed about to protest, then simply nodded. "Very well." The next morning dawned clear and mild. Cole hitched the horses to the wagon while Lillian prepared a cold lunch for them to take along. When she emerged from the house, Cole was momentarily taken aback. She had done something different with her hair, arranging it in a less severe style that partially obscured her scar. Her dress, while still plain, had been freshly pressed, and she wore a bonnet that framed her face attractively. "You look nice," Cole said before he could stop himself. A flush of color rose to Lillian's cheeks. "Thank you. I prefer to be presentable in town." The journey to Concordia passed more comfortably than their first trip together. Lillian pointed out wildflowers along the way, naming each variety with the confidence of someone well-versed in botany. Cole found himself enjoying her commentary, impressed by her knowledge. "How do you know so much about plants?" he asked as she identified a patch of prairie clover. "Books primarily," Lillian admitted. "And my father had a small garden behind our boarding house in Boston. He was quite proud of it, taught me everything he knew." It was the most she had volunteered about her past since arriving, and Cole sensed an opening. "What was it like, running a boarding house?" Lillian's expression grew wistful. "Busy. Always busy, but I enjoyed it. We had regular boarders, businessmen, teachers, the occasional artist. I loved listening to their conversations at dinner, learning about their different worlds." She paused, lost in memory. "My father called me his little sponge, always soaking up knowledge. You must have been a bright child," Cole observed. "I was fortunate to receive an education," she replied. "Many girls aren't so lucky." "And after the fire?" Cole asked gently, aware he was treading on sensitive ground. Lillian's face closed like a book snapping shut. "After the fire, I learned that education and intelligence matter very little when you're a woman alone in the world with a ruined face." The bluntness of her statement left Cole momentarily speechless. Before he could formulate a response, Concordia came into view, ending their conversation naturally. The town was bustling with Saturday activity. Farmers and ranchers had come in to trade and socialize, filling the streets with wagons and horses. As Cole helped Lillian down from their wagon, he was acutely aware of the stares directed their way. News traveled fast in small communities, and everyone knew that Mackenzie had purchased the scarred woman's contract. Ignore them, he said quietly, offering his arm to Lillian. She placed her hand lightly on his sleeve, her chin lifted proudly. I always do. Their first stop was the general store, where Lillian efficiently selected staples like flour, sugar, coffee, and salt, along with dried fruits, beans, and various spices that Cole had never bothered with. The proprietor, Harold Wilson, watched them with undisguised curiosity. "Heard you got yourself some help, Mackenzie," Wilson commented as he tallied their purchases. "Miss Abbott is working for me, yes," Cole replied neutrally. Wilson's eyes flicked to Lillian, then back to Cole. "Unusual arrangement for a bachelor." "Is there something wrong with our order, Mr. Wilson?" Lillian interjected coolly. The storekeeper had the grace to look embarrassed. "No, madam. Everything's in order." "Then we'll take our purchases now, thank you," she said with quiet authority. Outside, Cole couldn't help but smile. "You handled him well." Lillian adjusted her bonnet. "People like Mr. Wilson thrive on gossip. The best response is polite indifference." "Is that what you've been practicing with me? Polite indifference?" Cole asked, only half joking. She looked at him directly then, her green eyes challenging. "Would you prefer false warmth and pretended friendship? We have a business arrangement, Mr. Mackenzie. I work for you because I have no choice. Pretending otherwise serves neither of us." Cole felt as though she'd slapped him. "I never asked for pretense." "No. Then what did you expect when you purchased my contract?" Her voice remained low, but there was an undercurrent of emotion that belied her calm exterior. "That I would be grateful. That I would view my servitude as some kind of rescue." "I didn't think that far ahead," Cole admitted. "I just couldn't stand watching you being auctioned off like cattle." Something flickered in Lillian's expression, surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. "So it was pity?" "No," Cole said firmly. "Not pity. I don't rightly know what it was. But I don't regret it, and I hope someday you won't either." Before Lillian could respond, they were interrupted by a high-pitched voice calling Cole's name. A woman approached, elaborately dressed in a fashion that seemed out of place in the frontier town. Beside her walked a gentleman in an expensive suit, looking uncomfortable in the dusty street. "Cole Mackenzie, as I live and breathe," the woman exclaimed. "It's been an age since you've come to town." "Charlotte," Cole acknowledged with a nod. "Howard." Howard Phelps gave a curt nod in return. Charlotte Phelps, formerly Charlotte Dunham, had once been the object of Cole's affections before she'd chosen the wealthier prospect of the banker's son. "And who is this?" Charlotte asked, her curious gaze fixed on Lillian. "Lillian Abbott," Cole replied. "She's working at my ranch." Charlotte's eyebrows rose, and she exchanged a meaningful glance with her husband. "Oh, how progressive of you, Cole." The condescension in her tone was unmistakable. Lillian stiffened beside Cole, but her face remained impassive. "Miss Abbott is an excellent cook and housekeeper," Cole said, a protective edge entering his voice. "My place hasn't been in such good order since my mother was alive." "I'm sure," Charlotte replied, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Well, we must be going. The new dressmaker is expecting me. Do give our regards to." "Well, I suppose there's no one else at your ranch, is there?" As the couple walked away, Cole let out a slow breath. "I apologize for Charlotte. She's always been—" "There's no need to explain," Lillian interrupted. "I understand perfectly well what Mrs. Phelps was implying." Cole turned to face her. "What happened between me and Charlotte was a long time ago. She made her choice and I've made my peace with it." "It's none of my business," Lillian said firmly. "No, but I'd prefer you know the truth rather than town gossip," Cole insisted. "Charlotte and I were courting. She decided Howard Phelps with his banking fortune was a better prospect than a struggling rancher. End of story." Lillian studied him for a moment. "She's a fool, then," she said simply, before turning toward the wagon. We should finish our errands. I'd like to visit the seed merchant before we leave town. Cole stared after her, puzzled by her comment but strangely warmed by it. As he followed her to the wagon, he realized that for the first time since Lillian had arrived at his ranch, she had offered a genuine opinion rather than careful neutrality. It was a small thing, but somehow it felt like progress. The return journey from town was more relaxed than their trip in. The wagon was loaded with supplies, and Lillian seemed less guarded, pointing out more wildflowers and even smiling faintly when Cole told a humorous story about a stubborn calf he'd once rescued. "I've been thinking," Cole said as they neared the ranch, "about expanding the vegetable garden. With those seeds you bought, we could grow enough to have plenty for ourselves and maybe sell some in town come harvest time." Lillian considered this. It would be sensible. The soil is good, and with proper irrigation, we could grow quite a variety. "We'd need to clear more land, set up a better watering system," Cole mused. "I've been meaning to do it for years, just never got around to it." "I could help," Lillian offered. "I'm stronger than I look." Cole glanced at her slender form doubtfully. "It's hard work." "I'm not afraid of hard work, Cole," she said, using his first name naturally for the first time. "I've never had the luxury of being afraid of it." He nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. "We'll start tomorrow then, together." The next morning dawned hot and clear, promising a scorching day ahead. Cole and Lillian set to work early, marking out the expanded garden area and beginning the laborious process of clearing the tough prairie grass. Cole worked the ground with a plow while Lillian followed behind, pulling out roots and stones. By midday, both were drenched in sweat. Cole called a halt, insisting they rest in the shade of a large oak tree near the house. Lillian brought out a pitcher of cool water and some bread and cheese she'd prepared earlier. "You weren't exaggerating about being strong," Cole commented as they ate. "Most women I know would have given up hours ago." Lillian took a long drink of water before responding. "Necessity is a powerful motivator. After my parents died, I took whatever work I could find. Laundress, scullery maid, factory worker. None of it was easy." "How did you end up on a bride ship?" Cole asked, genuinely curious. Lillian's hand unconsciously rose to her scarred cheek. "The fire that killed my parents also took my prospects. In Boston, appearances matter greatly. No respectable family wanted a scarred woman for their son, regardless of her other qualities. No reputable business wanted such a face representing them to customers." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Cole could hear the old pain beneath her words. "The bride ship offered a fresh start. Out west, I was told, men were so desperate for wives that they cared more for a woman's ability to work than her appearance." "That's partially true," Cole acknowledged. "But people are people, no matter where you go. Some judge by appearances, others look deeper." "And which are you, Cole Mackenzie?" Lillian asked, her green eyes studying him intently. Cole considered the question seriously. "I'd like to think I look deeper, but I'm as flawed as anyone. I've made judgments based on what I could see rather than what was truly there." "At least you admit it," Lillian said with a small smile. "Most don't." They returned to work after their brief rest, continuing until late afternoon when the garden expansion was finally complete. Both were exhausted but shared a sense of accomplishment as they surveyed their work. "Tomorrow we'll set up the irrigation and plant those seeds," Cole said as they walked back to the house. "Should be easier than today's labor." "I'll prepare a special supper tonight," Lillian decided. "We've earned it." Later, as they sat at the table enjoying a hearty beef stew with dumplings, Cole found himself watching Lillian. In the warm light of the oil lamps, with her hair loosened from its tight bun by the day's labor, she looked different. The scar was still there, of course, but somehow it seemed less prominent, or perhaps he was simply becoming accustomed to it. "May I ask you something personal?" Cole ventured. Lillian set down her spoon. "You may ask, I may not answer." "Fair enough," he acknowledged. "How did it happen?" "The fire." She was quiet for so long that Cole thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "It was winter. One of our boarders fell asleep with a lit cigar. The fire spread quickly through the old house. My father got me out, then went back for my mother, who was trapped upstairs." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "I tried to follow him. That's when a burning beam fell. It caught my clothes, my hair, my face. A neighbor pulled me back, saved my life. My parents never made it out." "I'm sorry," Cole said inadequately, wishing he hadn't asked. "It was 3 years ago," Lillian replied, echoing her words from their first journey together. "The physical pain is long gone. The other kind, well, that fades more slowly. Does it ever bother you?" "The scar, I mean," Cole asked hesitantly. Lillian's laugh held no humor. "Only when I see myself reflected in others' eyes, or in a mirror." She touched her cheek lightly. "It's strange. Sometimes I forget it's there until I catch someone staring or looking away too quickly." "For what it's worth," Cole said carefully, "I hardly notice it anymore." "That's kind of you to say, but unnecessary," Lillian replied, rising to clear their plates. "I've made my peace with my appearance. It's others who seem unable to do so." As she moved around the kitchen, efficiently washing dishes and putting them away, Cole was struck by how much had changed in just 1 week. The house felt different, not just cleaner and more organized, but somehow warmer, more like a home than it had been since his parents died. And Cole himself felt different too. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for years had receded, replaced by a growing awareness of Lillian as more than just hired help. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, appreciating her dry wit and intelligence, admiring her strength and resilience. It was dangerous territory, he knew. She was bound to him by a contract, not by choice. Any feelings beyond employer and employee would complicate an already complex situation. And yet, as he watched her move about the kitchen with quiet efficiency, Cole couldn't deny that something was shifting between them, subtle but undeniable. The question was whether Lillian felt it too, and if she did, whether she would ever allow herself to acknowledge it. Summer settled over the Kansas prairie, bringing long, hot days and brief, intense thunderstorms that turned the dusty roads to mud within minutes. June gave way to July, and the expanded garden flourished under Lillian's careful tending. Rows of corn grew tall, their tassels waving in the breeze. Beans climbed sturdy poles, tomatoes ripened on the vine, and squash plants sprawled across the rich soil. Cole and Lillian fell into an easy rhythm of shared work and quiet evenings. He taught her to ride, discovering she was a quick learner with an intuitive feel for horses. She introduced new dishes to their table, making use of the garden's bounty and the wild berries and herbs she gathered during her explorations of the property. Their conversations grew longer and more personal as mutual wariness gave way to cautious trust. Cole shared stories of his childhood on the ranch, of his father's dreams for the land and his mother's gentle guidance. Lillian spoke of Boston, of books she had read and plays she had seen, opening windows to a world Cole had never experienced. It was during one such evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching heat lightning play across the distant horizon, that Cole first noticed the change in how he saw Lillian. She was describing a performance of Shakespeare she had attended as a girl, her face animated with the memory, her hands gesturing expressively as she recounted the story of Romeo and Juliet. "It sounds tragic," Cole commented when she finished. Why would anyone want to watch something so sad? Lillian considered his question seriously. Because it's beautiful, even in its tragedy. Because it reminds us that love can be powerful enough to defy families, society, even death itself. Seems foolish to me, Cole argued mildly. All that death over youthful passion. Perhaps, Lillian conceded. But haven't you ever felt something so strongly that reason and good sense abandoned you? Cole thought of the auction block, of his impulsive bid for Lillian's contract. Maybe once or twice, he admitted. She turned to look at him, her profile illuminated by the faint glow from the kitchen window behind them. In that moment, with her guard down and her expression open, Lillian was beautiful to him not despite her scar but somehow inclusive of it, as if it were just another feature that made her uniquely herself. The realization struck Cole with unexpected force. He was attracted to Lillian Abbott. Not out of pity or loneliness, but genuine attraction to the woman. She was intelligent, resilient, complex. Cole, her voice brought him back to the present. You've gone quiet. Just thinking about what you said, he replied, grateful for the darkness that hid his flushed face. About feeling things strongly enough to abandon good sense. And, she prompted, and I think maybe there's something to it after all, he said carefully. Sometimes the heart knows what it wants before the head has figured it out. Lillian studied him for a long moment, then turned her gaze back to the distant lightning. Perhaps, she said softly, or perhaps the heart simply wants what it cannot or should not have. The weight of unspoken words hung between them, heavy as the humid air before a storm. Cole wanted to ask what she meant, to push past the careful boundaries they had established, but something in her posture, a slight withdrawal, a tensing of her shoulders warned him away. Instead, he changed the subject to safer ground, commenting on the likelihood of rain and its effect on the wheat crop. Lillian followed his lead, and the moment passed, but something had shifted. A door cracked open that could never be fully closed again. 2 days later, Cole announced he needed to ride out to check on cattle grazing in the far pasture. To his surprise, Lillian asked to accompany him. I'd like to see more of the ranch, she explained as she helped saddle the horses. I've been here nearly 2 months and haven't ventured beyond the immediate surroundings. Cole was pleased by her interest. It's about 3 miles to the north pasture, not a difficult ride, but it'll take most of the morning. Lillian mounted her horse with growing confidence, adjusting her skirts over the side saddle Cole had purchased for her on their last trip to town. I've packed food for us, she said, indicating the saddlebags, and extra water. They set out under a cloudless blue sky, riding side by side where the trail allowed, single file where it narrowed. Cole pointed out landmarks along the way, a stand of cottonwoods marking a seasonal creek, a rocky outcropping where he'd played as a boy, the distant line of hills that marked the boundary of his property. It's beautiful, Lillian said as they paused atop a small rise that offered a panoramic view of the ranch. I never appreciated how vast and open it is out here. In Boston, everything feels contained, buildings hemming you in on all sides. Do you miss it? Cole asked. The city. Lillian considered the question. I miss certain aspects, libraries, theaters, the energy of so many people in one place. But there's something freeing about this landscape. It's as if you can breathe more deeply here. Cole nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. That's why I could never leave, even when times were hard. This land gets in your blood. They continued on, eventually reaching the north pasture where a small herd of cattle grazed on the lush summer grass. Cole dismounted to check on a newborn calf, and Lillian joined him, watching as he examined the animal with gentle hands. He looks healthy, Cole announced, satisfied. Born just a few days ago, I'd guess. Lillian reached out hesitantly to touch the calf's soft coat. "He's beautiful. I've never been this close to one before." "City girl through and through," Cole teased gently. "I'm learning," she replied with a smile that transformed her face, making her look younger and more carefree than he had ever seen her. They spent an hour checking the herd before finding a shady spot beneath a solitary oak tree for their meal. Lillian spread a cloth on the ground and unpacked cold fried chicken, biscuits, pickled vegetables, and apple tarts. "This is quite a feast for a simple ride," Cole commented, impressed by her thoughtfulness. "I enjoy cooking for someone who appreciates it," Lillian replied. "You're an appreciative audience, Cole Mackenzie." "And you're a remarkably talented cook," he returned, helping himself to another piece of chicken. Among other things, they ate in companionable silence for a while, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. The day was warm but not oppressive, a gentle breeze keeping the worst of the heat at bay. "May I ask you something personal?" Lillian said suddenly, echoing Cole's words from weeks before. "You may ask. I may not answer," he replied with a smile, returning her own phrase to her. "Fair enough," she acknowledged. "Why did you never marry? After Charlotte, I mean." Cole hadn't expected this question, but he found he didn't mind it. "Partly because of Charlotte, I suppose. Her choosing Howard over me stung my pride more than my heart, truth be told, made me wary of pursuing anyone else." He paused, considering. "And partly because running this ranch alone has been all-consuming. Didn't leave much time for courting." "But you must have been lonely," Lillian persisted. Cole met her gaze directly. "Yes, I was. Still am sometimes, despite having company now." Something flickered in Lillian's eyes, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a shared feeling. "Loneliness doesn't always disappear in the presence of others," she said softly. "Sometimes it's most acute when you're with someone but still feel separate from them. Is that how you feel?" "Separate?" Cole asked, the question more direct than he had intended. Lillian looked away, her fingers tracing patterns on the cloth between them. "I've felt separate from the world since the fire, as if there's an invisible barrier between myself and everyone else." "Everyone?" Cole pressed gently. She looked back at him then, her expression vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. "Not always," she admitted. "Not recently." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Cole found himself leaning slightly forward, drawn by something in her eyes that mirrored his own growing feelings. A distant rumble of thunder broke the spell. They both looked up to see dark clouds gathering on the horizon, much closer than they had been when the ride began. "We should head back," Cole said reluctantly, beginning to pack up their picnic. "Looks like a storm's rolling in faster than expected." Lillian nodded, helping him gather their things. Their hands brushed as they worked, and neither pulled away immediately, the brief contact lingering longer than necessary. They mounted quickly and set off toward home at a faster pace than their outward journey. The wind picked up, bending the tall grass and bringing with it the smell of rain. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by the growling rumble of thunder drawing steadily closer. "We're not going to beat it," Cole called over the rising wind. "There's a line shack about half a mile ahead. We'll shelter there until it passes." They urged their horses to a gallop, racing against the approaching storm. Fat raindrops began to fall as they reached the small wooden structure that served as emergency shelter for ranch hands caught in bad weather. Cole helped Lillian dismount, then quickly led the horses to a lean-to attached to the shack's side. By the time they hurried inside, the rain was coming down in sheets. The shack was simple but sturdy, one room with a small wood stove, a narrow cot, a rough table, and a single chair. Cole struck a match and lit the oil lamp hanging from a ceiling beam, casting a warm glow throughout the space. "Not exactly luxurious," he apologized, "but it's dry." Lillian pushed wet strands of hair from her face. "It's perfect. I was beginning to think we'd be drenched through." Outside, the storm intensified, rain hammering against the roof and walls. Lightning cracked nearby, followed almost immediately by a deafening clap of thunder that made Lillian jump. "Just a summer storm," Cole reassured her, moving to the wood stove. "They blow in fast and fierce, but they usually pass quickly. There's some dry wood here. I'll get a fire going to warm us up." Lillian nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. Her dress was damp, clinging to her slender frame in a way that made Cole avert his eyes out of respect. "There are some blankets in that trunk," he said, gesturing as he knelt to build the fire. "You might want to wrap up until your clothes dry a bit." Lillian found a rough woolen blanket and draped it around her shoulders, then sat on the edge of the cot, watching as Cole coaxed flames from kindling. The small stove quickly warmed the shack, creating a cocoon of comfort against the raging storm outside. "We could be here a while," Cole said, settling into the chair across from her. "That storm isn't letting up." "There are worse places to be stranded," Lillian observed. "At least we're safe and dry." They lapsed into silence, listening to the rhythm of rain on the roof and the occasional boom of thunder. The close quarters created an intimacy they hadn't experienced before, making Cole acutely aware of Lillian's presence just a few feet away. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Lillian said suddenly. Cole raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Anything. Something you've never told anyone else." He thought for a moment. "I wanted to be a doctor when I was young. Used to patch up injured animals I found, dream about healing people someday." "Why didn't you pursue it?" Lillian asked, genuinely interested. "No money for medical school, for one thing. And after Pa fell ill, the ranch needed me." Cole shrugged. "Dreams change, I suppose." "Or get deferred," Lillian suggested. "Perhaps one day you could still study medicine." Cole smiled at her optimism. "I'm a bit old to be starting over, but I appreciate the thought." He leaned forward slightly. "Your turn. Tell me something I don't know about you." Lillian pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I write poetry," she admitted. "Not very good poetry, but it helps me make sense of my thoughts." "Would you share some with me sometime?" Cole asked. She looked surprised by his interest. "Perhaps, if I ever find the courage." "I'd like that," he said sincerely. Another comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the sounds of the storm and the occasional pop from the wood stove. Outside, the rain continued unabated, but the thunder had grown more distant, the worst of the storm moving past them. "We might as well get comfortable," Cole said eventually. "Could be an hour or more before it's safe to head back." "I don't mind," Lillian replied softly. "It's peaceful here, despite the storm." Cole studied her in the lamplight, struck again by how his perception of her had changed. The scar that had once seemed so defining now registered as just one aspect of a complex, fascinating woman. He saw beyond it to the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength in her bearing, the gentle curve of her lips when she smiled. "What are you thinking?" Lillian asked, catching his gaze. Cole considered deflecting, then decided on honesty. "I was thinking about how differently I see you now compared to that day in town." "And how do you see me?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. "As one of the strongest people I've ever known," he replied. "As someone who hasn't let circumstances define her, even when those circumstances were cruel." Lillian looked away, emotion flickering across her features. "You give me too much credit. I've had my share of bitterness and self-pity." "We all have moments of weakness," Cole said. "It's rising above them that matters." She met his eyes again. "And you, Cole Mackenzie, have you had your moments of weakness?" "More than I can count," he admitted with a rueful smile. including some recent ones. Recent, she echoed, a question in her tone. Cole hesitated, knowing he stood at a crossroads. What he said next could change everything between them for better or worse. But the intimacy of the moment, the isolation of the storm, gave him courage he might not have found otherwise. I've been fighting certain feelings that I shouldn't have as your employer, he said carefully. Thoughts that go beyond our arrangement. Lillian's expression stilled, giving nothing away. What sort of feelings? Cole took a deep breath. Admiration, respect, and something more personal that I have no right to express, given your situation. Given that you purchased my contract, you mean, Lillian clarified, her voice neutral. Yes, Cole acknowledged. That creates an imbalance I can't ignore no matter what I might feel. Lillian was silent for so long that Cole began to regret his honesty. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. You're an unusual man, Cole Mackenzie. How so? He asked, uncertain of her meaning. Most men in your position wouldn't hesitate to take advantage. They would consider their purchase a right to whatever they wanted. She looked at him directly. You've never once made me feel that way. I never will, Cole promised. Your contract entitles me to your labor, nothing more. Your feelings, your affections, those remain entirely your own to give or withhold as you choose. Something shifted in Lillian's expression, a softening around her eyes. And if I chose to give them, hypothetically speaking, Cole's heart quickened. Then they would be the most precious gift I've ever received. But I would want to be certain you were giving them freely, not out of obligation or gratitude. I've never been one to act from obligation or gratitude, Lillian said with the hint of a smile. Despite my circumstances, I've always maintained my own mind, my own heart. She rose from the cot and moved to stand before him, letting the blanket slip from her shoulders. Cole looked up at her, scarcely daring to breathe. When you bought my contract, Cole Mackenzie, I thought I knew what to expect. Another man seeing a convenient servant, possibly more. I built walls to protect myself, determined to endure whatever came. Her voice softened. I never expected kindness, respect, the chance to be seen as a person rather than a possession. Cole stood slowly, closing the small distance between them without touching her. Is that how you see yourself now? As a person, not a possession? In your eyes, yes, Lillian whispered. And it's changed how I see myself. Outside, the rain had diminished to a gentle patter, the storm's fury spent. Inside the shack, a different kind of storm was brewing, years of loneliness and guarded emotions giving way to something new and fragile. Lillian, Cole said, her name a question and a promise all at once. She reached up, tentatively placing her palm against his cheek. I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if it's wise or foolish, but I'm tired of letting fear dictate my choices. Cole covered her hand with his own. I would never ask for more than you're willing to give, and I would never tie it to your contract. If there's to be something between us, it must be separate from our arrangement. Then let's keep it separate, Lillian suggested. During the day, I work for you as agreed, but moments like this, away from those obligations. These can be ours alone, belonging to neither employer nor employee, but to Cole and Lillian as people. It was an imperfect solution to a complex situation, but it was honest. Cole nodded slowly. I can accept those terms. Lillian's smile was like sunrise after a long night. Good. Because I find myself increasingly drawn to the man who saw value in a woman everyone else rejected. Cole's hand moved to gently trace the line of her scar, a touch so light it was barely there. They were fools, he said simply. All of them. The kiss, when it came, was gentle and tentative, a question rather than a demand. Lillian answered by leaning into him, her hands sliding to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. The moment stretched, deepened, became something neither had experienced before, not just physical connection, but recognition of a kindred spirit. When they finally drew apart, both were breathing quickly, surprised by the intensity of what had passed between them. "The rain has stopped," Lillian observed, though she made no move to step away from Cole's embrace. "So it has," he agreed, equally reluctant to release her. "We should head back before dark." They gathered their things and prepared to leave, each movement deliberate as they adjusted to this new awareness between them. As Cole helped Lillian mount her horse, their eyes met with shared understanding. Whatever had begun in this simple line shack during a summer storm would continue to grow, complicated by their circumstances, but no less real for it. The ride home was quiet, each lost in thought about what had transpired and what might lie ahead. But unlike the silence that had marked their early days together, this one was comfortable, filled with possibility rather than caution. As the ranch house came into view, Cole wondered if everything would look different now, transformed by the shift in his relationship with Lillian. But the house stood just as they had left it. The garden still needed tending, and the evening chores awaited them. Life continued, outwardly unchanged. Only Cole and Lillian were different, carrying the secret of what had passed between them like a shared treasure, uncertain where it might lead but willing, at last, to find out together. August brought relentless heat that shimmered above the prairie like a living thing. The days stretched long, work beginning at dawn to avoid the worst of the afternoon sun. Cole and Lillian maintained their agreement during daylight hours. They were employer and employee, their interactions proper and focused on the tasks at hand. But evenings belonged to them alone, moments carved out of obligation where they could simply be a man and a woman drawn to each other. They were careful, their growing relationship still tentative and private. A touch of hands as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Conversations that lasted late into the night, revealing childhood dreams and adult disappointments. Occasional kisses, sweet and increasingly passionate, that left them both yearning for more but conscious of the unusual nature of their situation. It was during one such evening, as they walked along the creek that ran through the eastern edge of Cole's property, that Lillian broached a subject they had been avoiding. "What happens when my contract ends?" she asked, her hand resting lightly in the crook of Cole's arm. 5 years is a long time. Cole had been wondering the same thing. "What would you want to happen?" Lillian stopped walking, turning to face him. "I don't know. I've never allowed myself to think beyond my current circumstances. Planning for the future has seemed dangerous somehow." "Dangerous how?" Cole asked gently. "Disappointment hurts less when you don't hope for anything," she explained. "I learned that after the fire." Cole's heart ached at the resignation in her voice. "That's no way to live, Lillian." "Perhaps not," she conceded, "but it's how I've survived." He took her hands in his. "Then maybe it's time to do more than survive, to actually live, to hope for things, even if they might not come to pass." Lillian looked down at their joined hands. "And what do you hope for, Cole?" It was a question he'd been asking himself with increasing frequency. "I hope that when your contract ends you'll stay, not because of a legal obligation but because you want to." "As what?" she pressed. "Your housekeeper, your—" "My wife," Cole said simply. "If that's what you wanted too." Lillian's eyes widened, her breath catching audibly. "Cole." "I'm not asking now," he clarified quickly. "It's too soon for that. I'm just telling you what I hope for eventually. A future where you stay because you choose to, not because a piece of paper says you must." Tears glistened in Lillian's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Cole assured her. 5 years is a long time, like you said. A lot can change. but I wanted you to know that I'm thinking beyond the contract too." She nodded, visibly moved by his words. "Thank you for that. For seeing a future where I have a choice." They resumed walking, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, but something had changed between them. A door opened to possibilities beyond their current arrangement, beyond the constraints that had brought them together. 3 days later, Cole announced he needed to make a trip to Concordia to order supplies for the upcoming harvest. Lillian decided to accompany him, wanting to purchase fabric for new curtains and some personal items she needed. The town was busy with end-of-summer activity. As they walked down the main street, Cole was aware of curious glances directed their way. News of his unusual arrangement with Lillian had circulated widely, and their appearance together always generated interest. "I'll meet you at Wilson's General Store in an hour," Cole told Lillian as they parted ways, she to the dressmaker's shop and he to the bank. Cole's business at the bank took longer than expected. Howard Phelps was out of town, and the clerk handling his affairs was meticulous to the point of tedium. By the time Cole finished securing a loan to cover harvest expenses, he was running late. He hurried to Wilson's, entering the store to find Lillian already there, selecting items from the shelves. But something was wrong. Her posture was rigid, her face pale except for 2 spots of color high on her cheeks. Beside her, Charlotte Phelps stood with 2 other women, all 3 wearing expressions of false concern. "All I'm saying, Miss Abbott, is that people are talking," Charlotte was saying as Cole approached. "It doesn't look proper, an unmarried woman living with a bachelor, contract or no contract." "My arrangement with Mr. Mackenzie is entirely proper," Lillian replied, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. "I have separate quarters and fulfill only the duties specified in my contract." One of the other women, Eliza Thompson, the Reverend's wife, made a disapproving noise. "Even so, dear, appearances matter. For your own reputation, you might consider different employment. Mrs. Wilson mentioned they need help at the hotel. You'd have a room there among other women." "I'm quite satisfied with my current position, thank you," Lillian said firmly. "Are you indeed?" Charlotte asked with feigned innocence. "And is Cole equally satisfied with your position?" The innuendo was unmistakable. Cole had heard enough. "Ladies," he said coolly, stepping forward to stand beside Lillian, "I trust you're not bothering Miss Abbott with idle gossip." Charlotte had the grace to look momentarily abashed, but quickly recovered. "Cole, we were just expressing concern for Miss Abbott's reputation. Living alone with you miles from town. Well, people do wonder." "People should mind their own business," Cole replied flatly. "Miss Abbott's reputation is beyond reproach, as is mine." "Of course," Charlotte backpedaled slightly. "We meant no offense." "Yet you caused it anyway," Cole observed. He turned to Lillian. "Are you ready to go? I've finished my business in town." Lillian nodded, her face composed but her eyes revealing her hurt. "Yes, I have everything we need." Cole paid for their purchases and escorted Lillian from the store, acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. Once outside, he stopped, turning to face her. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "Charlotte has always had a vicious streak." "It's not your fault," Lillian replied, but her voice trembled slightly. "And she's not wrong. People are talking." "Let them talk," Cole said firmly. "We know the truth." But even as he said it, Cole knew that perception often mattered more than reality, especially for a woman in Lillian's position. The town's gossip could make her life difficult, could follow her long after her contract ended. They rode home in subdued silence, the pleasant mood of recent days overshadowed by the encounter in town. That evening, as they sat at the kitchen table after supper, Lillian finally spoke about what had happened. "I've been naive," she said, absently tracing patterns on the wooden tabletop. I thought our private feelings could remain separate from our public arrangement, but people will assume the worst regardless. Cole reached across the table to cover her hand with his. What happened today doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't it? Lillian looked up, her eyes troubled. I came west to escape judgment, to find a place where my scar didn't define me. Instead, I've found new ways to be judged, new reasons to be seen as less than respectable. You are respectable, Cole insisted. More than those gossips in town could ever be. Lillian withdrew her hand gently. Respectability isn't just what we know to be true, it's what others perceive. And right now, the perception is that we're. She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Cole understood. In the eyes of Concordia, Lillian was his mistress, not merely his housekeeper, regardless of the truth. And while he didn't care about the town's opinion of him, he cared deeply about how it affected Lillian. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "If staying here damages your reputation, I won't hold you to the contract. You could find employment in town, as Mrs. Thompson suggested." The thought of Lillian leaving twisted something painful in Cole's chest, but he meant what he said. Her well-being mattered more than his own desires. Lillian was quiet for a long moment, considering. "No," she said at last. "I won't be driven away by gossip. I've spent too much of my life allowing others to determine my path." Her eyes met his, resolute. "But perhaps we need to be more careful, more conscious of appearances." "More distant," Cole translated, understanding her meaning. "For now," Lillian agreed softly. "Until we figure out a better solution." It wasn't what either of them wanted, but it seemed the only sensible course. They agreed to be more circumspect, to maintain a proper distance when in town, to give no further fuel to the rumors already circulating. That night, as Cole lay awake listening to the familiar creaks of the house, he thought about the future he had begun to imagine with Lillian, a future now complicated by the narrow-mindedness of others. There had to be a way forward that wouldn't compromise her reputation, or force them to deny their growing feelings for each other. An idea began to take shape in his mind, unconventional but potentially workable. It would require careful planning and Lillian's agreement, but it might offer a solution that would satisfy both propriety and their hearts. With the first hints of a plan forming, Cole finally drifted into sleep, determined to find a way for them to be together that the town could accept without damaging Lillian's hard-won dignity. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the promise of autumn in the air. The wheat fields turned golden, ready for harvest, and the garden yielded its final bounty of the season. Cole hired additional hands from town to help with the wheat, creating a busier household than the ranch had seen in years. Lillian rose to the challenge magnificently, preparing meals for the hungry workers, managing the household with quiet efficiency, and still finding time to preserve the garden's produce for the winter ahead. The men treated her with a respect born of appreciation for her cooking and admiration for her work ethic. None of them seemed concerned with the rumors from town, more interested in good food and fair wages than in gossip. Cole and Lillian maintained their agreement to be more circumspect, but in the privacy of the ranch, away from prying eyes, their relationship continued to deepen. They were more careful now, more aware of the potential consequences of their feelings, but neither could deny what was growing between them. It was after the harvest was complete and the hired hands had returned to town that Cole finally shared his idea with Lillian. They sat on the porch as dusk fell, the first chill of autumn making the warmth of the house behind them all the more inviting. "I've been thinking about our situation," Cole began, choosing his words carefully. "About the town's perception and how it affects you." Lillian nodded, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. It's been better lately. The harvest kept everyone too busy for much gossip. But it will start again, Cole pointed out. People have long memories and little to occupy them in winter. What are you suggesting? Lillian asked, a hint of wariness in her voice. Cole took a deep breath. A different kind of contract, a more formal relationship that no one could question. Lillian's brow furrowed. I don't understand marriage, Cole said simply. Not immediately, but announced as an engagement. It would explain your presence here, give you protection against gossip and… He hesitated, then forged ahead. It would be a step toward what I hope for anyway. Lillian stared at him, clearly taken aback. You want to announce an engagement as a solution to town gossip. It's more than that, Cole insisted. I care for you, Lillian, deeply. More than I've ever cared for anyone. I believe you have feelings for me too. This would just accelerate a natural progression. Natural progression, Lillian echoed, rising from her chair and moving to the porch railing. There's nothing natural about our situation, Cole. I'm bound to you by a legal contract. How can I know if my feelings are genuine or simply gratitude for your kindness? How can you be sure yours aren't just convenience or fascination with the unusual? Cole stood as well, keeping a respectful distance. Do you really believe that's all this is? Gratitude and convenience? Lillian turned to face him, her expression troubled. No, but I need to be sure. And I need you to be sure too. Marriage isn't something to enter lightly, especially not as a solution to gossip. You're right, Cole acknowledged, chagrined. I presented it poorly. This isn't about appearances, not really. It's about giving us the freedom to build something real without shadows hanging over us. But it would still be built on an uneven foundation, Lillian argued. I would come to you as a woman who legally belongs to you already. How could that ever be right? Cole hadn't considered it from this angle, and her words gave him pause. What if I tore up the contract? Released you from any obligation? And then what? Where would I go? How would I support myself? Lillian shook her head. You see, even that choice wouldn't truly be free. She was right, and Cole knew it. The very nature of their meeting, of the circumstances that had brought them together, created an imbalance that couldn't be easily rectified. His intentions were honorable, but the situation remained fundamentally problematic. What do you want, Lillian? He asked finally. Not what you think is practical or proper, but what you truly want. Lillian's expression softened. I want time, Cole. Time to know my own heart without the pressure of contracts or town gossip. Time to be sure that what I feel for you is real and lasting. She stepped closer to him. And I want you to have that time too, because if we ever did marry, I would need to know it was for love, not for appearances or propriety or any other reason. Cole nodded slowly. That's fair, more than fair. He reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. I can wait. However long it takes for you to be certain. And the town, the gossip, Lillian asked. We'll face it together, Cole promised. And in time they'll find something else to talk about. People always do. Lillian smiled then, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. You're a good man, Cole Mackenzie. Better than I dared hope for when that auctioneer sold my contract. And you're an extraordinary woman, Lillian Abbott, far more than I deserved to find that day. They stood together as night fell fully around them, not quite resolved but at peace with the uncertainty, willing to let time reveal the true nature of what was growing between them. Winter descended on the Kansas prairie with surprising swiftness that year. November brought early snow, transforming the landscape into a vast white expanse that glittered blindingly under the cold sun. The ranch settled into the quiet rhythm of the season. Days shortened, chores focused on keeping livestock fed and watered. Evenings lengthened beside the crackling fire in the wood stove. Cole and Lillian found a different kind of closeness in these winter months. With the outside world made distant by snow and cold, the ranch became an intimate world of their own. They spent evenings reading aloud to each other, Lillian introducing Cole to Dickens and Austen, Cole sharing dime novels and newspaper articles from the East. They played checkers and card games, Lillian proving to be unexpectedly competitive. They talked for hours about everything and nothing: childhood memories, hopes for the future, philosophical debates about books they'd read. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, the balance between them shifted. Lillian's confidence grew as she fully claimed her place in the household, not just as Cole's employee but as his partner in managing the ranch. Cole found himself consulting her on decisions, valuing her practical intelligence and fresh perspective. The initial awkwardness of their arrangement faded, replaced by mutual respect and deepening affection. By Christmas, neither could deny that their feelings had grown beyond mere attraction or convenience. The night before the holiday, after they had decorated a small pine tree with paper ornaments Lillian had crafted and strung popcorn garlands around the main room, Cole presented her with a gift. "It's not much," he said almost shyly, handing her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. "But I wanted you to have something special." Lillian unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "Cole, it's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the soft leather. "For your poetry," he explained. "You mentioned once that you write, but I've never seen any of it. I thought maybe having a proper place to keep your words might encourage you to share them someday." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to Lillian's eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "This means more than you know." She went to the chest of drawers where she kept her few possessions and returned with a package of her own. "I have something for you too." Cole unwrapped the gift to find a hand-knitted scarf in a rich blue that matched his eyes. "You made this?" he asked, running the soft wool between his fingers. Lillian nodded. "I've been working on it in the evenings after you go to bed. Mrs. Henderson showed me how when I visited her last month." Cole wrapped the scarf around his neck, touched by the hours of work she had put into it. "It's perfect. Thank you." They sat before the fire, the decorated tree casting dancing shadows across the room, both aware that this Christmas was unlike any either had experienced before. Not because of grand celebrations or expensive gifts, but because they were no longer alone in the world. "I have another gift for you," Cole said after a comfortable silence, "but it's not something I can wrap." Lillian looked at him curiously. "Oh." Cole reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document. "This is your indenture contract. I want you to have it." Lillian took the paper hesitantly. "I don't understand." "It's still legally binding," Cole explained. "I'm not tearing it up. That could create complications for both of us. But I want you to hold it, to keep it, to know that even though it exists, I consider you free to make your own choices." Lillian stared at the document in her hands, the paper that had determined her fate for the past 6 months. "Why now?" "Because I love you," Cole said simply. "And love isn't about ownership or obligation. It's about choice. I want you to stay because you want to, not because a piece of paper says you must." Lillian's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different, not the tears of gratitude for a thoughtful gift, but the deeper emotion of a woman who had finally heard words she had begun to long for. "I love you too," she whispered, the admission both frightening and liberating. "I think I have for some time now." Cole moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Then marry me, Lillian. Not for the town's sake, not because of gossip or appearances, but because we love each other and want to build a life together." Lillian looked into his earnest face, seeing there everything she had once believed she would never find: acceptance, respect, love that saw beyond her scars to the woman beneath. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger now. "Yes, I'll marry you, Cole Mackenzie." Their kiss sealed the promise, tender at first, then deepening with the release of months of restrained emotion. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their faces flushed with more than the heat from the fire. "When?" Cole asked, still holding her hands tightly. "Spring," Lillian decided. "When the world turns green again and we can stand beneath the open sky." "Spring it is," Cole agreed, his heart fuller than he had ever thought possible. That night, as snow fell silently outside the window, Cole and Lillian sat before the fire until the embers died, planning their future, sharing dreams long kept private, and marveling at the unexpected path that had brought them together. The contract that had once seemed to define their relationship now lay forgotten on the table, important only as the beginning of a story that would continue long after its terms had been fulfilled. Not a story of ownership, but of two souls who had found in each other the love everyone else had missed. Spring arrived late but gloriously in 1879. April brought warm breezes that melted the last of the winter snow, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the soil. The prairie came alive with wildflowers, bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush, and prairie phlox, creating a riot of color across the land. Birds returned from their winter migrations, filling the air with song from dawn to dusk. As the land renewed itself, Cole and Lillian made preparations for their wedding. They had announced their engagement during a trip to Concordia in February, generating a flurry of gossip that quickly gave way to acceptance. Even Charlotte Phelps had offered stiff congratulations, though her eyes betrayed her surprise that Lillian had secured what she herself had once rejected. The ceremony was set for the last Saturday in April, to be held on the ranch rather than in town. Reverend Thompson had agreed to perform the service, his initial reservations about their unusual situation overcome by the obvious sincerity of their commitment to each other. On the morning of their wedding day, Cole rose before dawn, filled with a nervous energy that wouldn't let him sleep. He slipped out of the house, careful not to wake Lillian, and walked to the small hill overlooking the ranch. As the sun broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, he thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought him to this moment. If he hadn't gone to town that particular day last May, if he hadn't been present when Lillian's contract was being auctioned, if he hadn't acted on that inexplicable impulse to bid, so many chances for their paths to have never crossed. Yet here they were, about to pledge their lives to each other before God and their neighbors. "Beautiful morning," said a voice behind him, startling Cole from his thoughts. He turned to find Joseph Henderson, his nearest neighbor and closest friend, walking up the hill to join him. "Perfect day for a wedding," Cole agreed, clasping Joseph's outstretched hand. "Thanks for coming early to help." Joseph clapped him on the shoulder. "Wouldn't miss it. Sarah's already at the house helping your bride get ready." He studied Cole's face, having any second thoughts. "Not a one," Cole replied honestly. "I've never been more certain of anything." Joseph nodded, satisfied. "Good, because that woman deserves a man who's sure about her." "She deserves better than me," Cole said, "but I aim to spend my life trying to be worthy of her anyway." The two men walked back to the ranch, where preparations were already underway. Other neighbors arrived throughout the morning, bringing food for the celebration and helping to set up tables and benches under the oak trees near the house. By noon, the ranch had been transformed. Flowers adorned every available surface. A simple arch of twisted branches stood in the yard where the ceremony would take place, and delicious aromas wafted from the outdoor cooking fires. Cole hadn't seen Lillian since the previous evening. Sarah Henderson and a few other women from neighboring ranches had insisted on traditional separation before the ceremony, with Lillian spending the night in the house and Cole bunking in the barn. Now, as the appointed hour approached, Cole changed into his best suit purchased new for the occasion and tried to tame his unruly hair with water and a comb. Joseph, serving as his best man, checked his pocket watch. "Almost time. You ready?" Cole nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the lump in his throat. They made their way to the arch, where Reverend Thompson already waited, prayer book in hand. The assembled guests, about 30 people from surrounding ranches and a few from town, fell silent as Cole took his place. And then Lillian appeared in the doorway of the house, and Cole forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple dress of pale blue, not white as was traditional, but somehow more fitting for their unconventional journey. Her auburn hair was arranged in soft waves rather than her usual severe style, with small white flowers woven throughout. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered that morning from the prairie. But it was her face that captured Cole, completely radiant with happiness, her green eyes shining with love, her scar barely noticeable in the glow of joy that surrounded her. Sarah Henderson accompanied her across the yard, serving as matron of honor in the absence of Lillian's family. When they reached the arch, Sarah placed Lillian's hand in Cole's, then stepped back, wiping tears from her eyes. "You're beautiful," Cole whispered, his voice catching. "So are you," Lillian replied with a smile that made his heart race. The ceremony itself was simple and brief. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices clear and sure as they promised to love, honor, and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. Cole had purchased plain gold bands in Concordia, and they slid onto their fingers as if they had always belonged there. "By the authority vested in me," Reverend Thompson concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." He smiled warmly at the couple. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Mackenzie." Cole didn't need to be told twice. He drew Lillian into his arms and kissed her with all the love he'd been storing up since falling for her, heedless of the audience around them. Lillian returned the kiss with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck as their guests erupted in cheers and applause. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and slightly embarrassed by their display, they turned to face their friends and neighbors as husband and wife for the first time. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. There was food and drink in abundance, music provided by a neighbor who played fiddle, and dancing under the stars as lanterns illuminated the yard. Cole and Lillian moved through it all in a state of dazed happiness, accepting congratulations, sharing dances, and stealing kisses whenever they could. As twilight deepened into night, the guests gradually departed, leaving behind good wishes and enough food to last the newlyweds a week. Joseph and Sarah were the last to leave, helping to clean up the worst of the mess before embracing the couple warmly. "We couldn't be happier for you both," Sarah said, hugging Lillian tightly. "You're good for each other." "Come for dinner next Sunday," Joseph added as he shook Cole's hand. "Give you time to settle in as husband and wife first." And then they were alone, standing in the yard of what was now truly their home, husband and wife in more than just name. "Mrs. Mackenzie," Cole said softly, testing the sound of it. "I like how that sounds," Lillian replied, leaning into his embrace. Cole swept her into his arms, making her laugh in surprise. "Then let me carry Mrs. Mackenzie over the threshold, as tradition demands." He carried her into the house that had once seemed so empty, but now felt full of promise. setting her down gently in the main room that had been transformed with flowers and candles for their wedding night. For a moment they stood looking at each other, both suddenly shy despite the months of growing closeness. "I never thought I'd have this," Lillian admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "After the fire, I believed no man would ever look at me with love, let alone marry me." Cole gently traced the line of her scar with his fingertip. "This is part of you, part of your story, but it's not who you are, Lillian. It never was. You saw that from the beginning," she said wonderingly, "even when I couldn't see it myself." "I saw a woman with extraordinary strength and dignity," Cole corrected. "Everything else came later, your intelligence, your kindness, your surprising stubbornness." He smiled at her indignant expression. "Yes, stubbornness. You're the most determined woman I've ever known." "I prefer to call it persistence," Lillian replied with a laugh. "Call it what you will," Cole said, drawing her closer. "It's one of the many things I love about you." Their kiss deepened, no longer constrained by propriety or uncertainty. They were husband and wife now, free to express the love that had grown between them over the past year, a love neither had expected to find, but both now recognized as the greatest blessing of their lives. Later, as they lay in the darkness of their bedroom, Lillian's head resting on Cole's chest, she spoke the words that had been forming in her heart for months. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Cole asked, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "For seeing value in me when no one else did. For giving me time to find myself again. For loving me exactly as I am." Cole tightened his arms around her. "I should be thanking you. You brought life back to this place and to me. I didn't know how lonely I was until you showed me what it means to truly share a life with someone." Lillian propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the faint moonlight streaming through the window. "Do you ever think about how unlikely our meeting was? All the circumstances that had to align for us to find each other." "I've thought about it often," Cole admitted. "If I hadn't gone to town that day, if my parents hadn't died in the fire, if Charlotte hadn't chosen Howard over me, if I hadn't been scarred and forced to seek a new life out west." They fell silent, contemplating the chain of events, some tragic, some merely coincidental, that had brought them together. "Perhaps it wasn't chance at all," Lillian suggested softly. "Perhaps we were always meant to find each other." Cole smiled, pulling her back down to rest against him. "I like that idea, that even through all the hardship we were being guided toward each other." "The cowboy and the woman nobody wanted," Lillian murmured sleepily. "The cowboy who found the love everyone else had missed," Cole corrected, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, both felt a sense of completion that neither had thought possible a year before. Their journey had begun with a transaction, $20 for 5 years of service, but had transformed into something far more valuable. A love built on mutual respect, genuine understanding, and the kind of deep connection that comes only when two souls recognize themselves in each other. Outside their window, the Kansas prairie stretched vast and peaceful under the moonlight. The land that had brought them together now bearing witness to the new life they would build, not as master and servant, but as husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. Epilogue. 5 years later, the laughter of children echoed across the ranch yard as 4-year-old James Mackenzie chased his 2-year-old sister, Emma, around the oak tree. Their mother watched from the porch, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly where their third child grew steadily larger with each passing day. "Don't go too far, James," Lillian called, smiling as her son waved acknowledgement without slowing his pursuit of his giggling sister. At 31, Lillian Mackenzie had blossomed into a woman who bore little resemblance to the scarred, withdrawn person who had stood on an auction block in Concordia, 5 years earlier. Her auburn hair, now streaked with subtle highlights from hours spent in the sun, was arranged in a practical but becoming style. Her green eyes sparkled with contentment, and the scar that had once defined her was now just another feature on a face that radiated happiness and vitality. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. Cole came riding up from the pasture, his tall figure easily recognizable even at a distance. The children spotted him too, abandoning their game to run toward their father, shouting excitedly. Cole dismounted, sweeping James up into one arm and Emma into the other, spinning them around until they shrieked with delight. Lillian watched, her heart full to bursting with love for her family. The ranch had prospered in the years since their marriage. Cole's careful management, combined with Lillian's practical business sense, had expanded their operations significantly. They now ran over 200 head of cattle, had doubled the size of their wheat fields, and had added a small apple orchard that was just beginning to produce fruit. 3 additional buildings had been constructed: a larger barn, a bunkhouse for the 2 ranch hands they employed year-round, and a small schoolhouse where Lillian taught James his letters and numbers. But more importantly than material success, they had built a life together that exceeded both their dreams, a partnership of equals based on deep respect and enduring love. Cole approached the porch, children still in his arms, his face breaking into a wide smile at the sight of his pregnant wife. At 37, he was in his prime, strong from years of physical labor, his face weathered by sun and wind, but his blue eyes as bright and kind as ever. "How are my girls today?" he asked, setting the children down to climb the porch steps. "We're well," Lillian replied, accepting his kiss. "Though your son is convinced his sister is coming today." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Is he now? And what makes him so sure it's a sister?" "He says Emma needs a sister because he already has a brother, that cow he named," Lillian explained with a laugh. "Sound reasoning," Cole agreed, placing his hand gently on her belly. "Though I'd be equally happy with another son." "As would I," Lillian assured him, "as long as he or she is healthy." They went inside together, the children racing ahead to wash up for the midday meal. The interior of the house had changed over the years, expanded to include 2 additional bedrooms, furnished with pieces Lillian had carefully selected for both beauty and practicality, decorated with paintings from a talented artist who had passed through Concordia the previous year. The most striking addition hung over the fireplace, a portrait of Cole and Lillian on their wedding day, captured by a traveling photographer who had set up his equipment in their yard. In the image, they stood close together, Cole's arm around Lillian's waist, both looking at each other rather than at the camera, their expressions revealing the depth of their feelings more eloquently than any words could have done. As they prepared lunch together, moving around the kitchen in the synchronized dance of a couple who knew each other's rhythms perfectly, Cole shared news from his morning ride. "Joseph Henderson mentioned that Charlotte and Howard Phelps are divorcing," he said, slicing bread while Lillian stirred a pot of stew. "Apparently Howard finally had enough of her spending and complaining. She's moving back east to live with her sister." Lillian considered this information. "That's unfortunate for them both," she said without malice. Over the years, she had made her peace with the town gossips, including Charlotte. Time and her evident happiness with Cole had silenced most of the wagging tongues. "Joseph also said there's a new family moving into the old Wilson place," Cole continued. "A widower with 3 young children, no older than 12, the youngest just 5. Lillian glanced at him, recognizing the tone in his voice. "You're thinking we should help them get settled?" Cole nodded. "Winter's coming. It's hard enough with 2 adults, but a man alone with 3 children. We'll invite them for Sunday dinner once they've arrived," Lillian decided immediately. "And I'll prepare some preserved foods they can take home. The children might enjoy playing with James and Emma." Cole smiled, leaning over to kiss her cheek. "This is why I love you, always thinking of others, always ready to help." "I learned from the best," Lillian replied softly, her hand finding his. "Someone once reached out to help me when no one else would. How could I do any less for others?" After lunch, while the children napped and Cole returned to his work, Lillian sat at the small desk in the corner of the main room, opening the leather journal Cole had given her that first Christmas. Its pages were now filled with her neat handwriting poems. Yes, but also observations about their life together, records of the children's milestones, thoughts about the future. She turned to a blank page and dipped her pen in ink, feeling the familiar urge to capture the contentment of this ordinary yet extraordinary day. As she wrote, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the tragic fire that had claimed her parents and scarred her face, through the desperation that had led her onto a bride ship, to the humiliation of standing on an auction block in a frontier town. Had anyone told her then that these painful events would lead to the deepest happiness she had ever known, she would never have believed it. Yet here she was, 5 years later, married to a man who loved her completely, mother to 2 beautiful children with a third on the way, respected in her community, and at peace with herself in a way she had once thought impossible. The door opened and Cole came in quietly, careful not to wake the children. He crossed to Lillian's desk, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Writing again?" he asked, his voice low. Lillian nodded, covering one of his hands with her own. "Just trying to capture how I feel today." "And how do you feel?" Cole asked, genuinely interested as always in her thoughts. Lillian turned to look up at him, the man who had purchased her contract but had given her freedom in every way that mattered. "Grateful," she said simply, "and loved. And hopeful for all the years we have ahead of us." Cole bent to kiss her, his lips gentle against hers. "Me too," he whispered. "Every single day with you feels like a gift I never expected to receive." Outside, the prairie stretched vast and golden under the autumn sun, the land that had witnessed their unlikely beginning now home to their thriving family. Inside, surrounded by the life they had built together, Cole and Lillian Mackenzie held each other close, secure in the knowledge that the love they had found against all odds would sustain them through whatever the future might hold. For they had discovered what others had failed to see, that sometimes the most precious treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting only for someone with the wisdom to look beyond appearances and recognize the true value of a heart capable of great love.